Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host, as usual. Good to see you, Daniel.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing fine,
Good.
and we're going to be talking about a subject we've talked about it before: peace and prosperity.
That's right.
I think we sort of use that terminology, but we're going to narrow it down. Peace and prosper. What are the prospects for peace and prosperity in 2019? And also, just what we expect, maybe some precise predictions for this next year, which is done with a little bit of risk because nobody wants to be embarrassed. But sometimes our projections are pretty good, and we'll have to see. At least there'll be the prospects for peace and prosperity. I want to start off by saying, that you're known for your expertise in foreign policy, and I dwell a little bit more on economics. But in one and the same, I see them as the same, and that's why we have one organization, peace and prosperity.
Yeah.
Because I'm convinced if you have peace, you have prosperity, and you can't define them. And if you have a subject dealing with foreign policy, sanctions and boycotts and all this has an economic effect. So you can't separate them. It's the issue of liberty is really what we're talking about. This is something that usually gets a lot of interest. I think that it's easy for me to think about longer term than short term. And quite frankly, it's hard for me to say, in 2019, peace and prosperity is going to break out. But just so if we can see in the way we see something happening that's beneficial, we try to nudge it and say that's going in the right direction, because there's never perfection on peace and prosperity, but there's a lot of things that we can challenge and encourage, and I think that's the way the world works. But I want to start off a little bit with the economic projections that I think might happen in 2019. First, I'm going to start with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has been big in the news this past year, and it's been blamed for contributing to the downturn of the stock market. And there's probably a lot of truth to that. They were raising interest rates, and it makes the point that they shouldn't be messing around and interfering in interest rates. They don't know what they're doing. And the fact that they were too low, too long, and they built a bubble, tinkering around like that is going to make things worse. But there's been a lot of criticism, even from the president, and this is traditional for presidents that want low interest rates because they think high interest rates causes recession. No, it's the low interest rates in prior years that cause the bubble that causes the recession. But nevertheless, the presidents always want low interest rates, as does Wall Street. So there's this big argument going on about what the Fed will do this next year. And I think the odds are very, very good that they're going to quit pretending that they can know the interest rate and that they must be lowered and the economy is going to be better. That is, they would stop rigging the interest rates in the sense of trying to drive the rates up, allowing the rates to go up because they like the pressure to keep them low will happen. I think they're going to give up on raising interest rates, and I think they'll give up even on the balance sheets, which will be a bigger challenge because that's sort of on autopilot, and they're selling a little bit off of what they bought of the $3.7 trillion they bought in the big recession. And so I think that is going to quit as well. And the main motivation there will be not because they're all Austrian economists now and they know what's best. They will be acting in a political sense, and I think the biggest motivation is going to be the recession. I believe the recession in many ways has started. Housing sales are down, and automobile sales are down. And when you look at if you look at debt and management of debt as a cause of recession, there's so much of it out there, everybody. And when you think of the debt bubble with the student loans and the housing markets and all, it's huge. And I think that's going to have an effect. I think there will be a point where some will make an argument, well, we've already started into it. But I think by the conventional measurement of recessions will be evident by the end of the year, and that is you have to have 2 quarters where the GDP actually goes down, which is an illusion anyway, because GDP is not necessarily the way you really predict, a downturn on the economy, because if you want to rig the GDP, which they do, you can raise the GDP by government spending more money, spend more money, run up the debt, and make stuff or make bombs.
Yeah.
Oh, the GDP just went up. So it is fallacious, but I think even in spite of all the shortcomings, they're going to have a hard time avoiding the admission that the economy is in recession and that this is the reason why they had to back off. The irony of all, one of the reasons why they want to raise interest rates a little bit, because they knew it was risky, is the fact that they do expect a recession. But if we don't have the interest rates up a little bit, what tool will we have to stimulate the economy? And we know that the only way you can stimulate the economy and get out of recession is lower interest rates, and refuse to admit the fact of what was going on in the Greenspan era was to get this thing all kicked off in '07 was most people admit it. Interest rates were kept too low too long, and therefore they continue to do this. But they believe that that you manipulate and you sort of judge the economy by the interest rate. Oh, we'll stimulate the economy. That is, we'll make money easy. Or if it's going too fast, they're going to slow it up. It's all an illusion of what they think they have, and they really can't do much about it. But I think that the economy is going to be less healthy by the end of the year. People will be looking at a recession, and it still couldn't be a mixture of what we had, because they called this last downturn, which really is continuing in many ways, is the Great Recession. Lasted longer, going with zero interest rates. It didn't do what it usually does. So it's something that they're going to still be a lot of rich people, I think, and a lot of rich people, and they're going to do okay. And the middle class probably will suffer the most. If you're on getting welfare, they're not going to quit those payments, even if the government closes down. Those payments aren't going to stop. But then again, they're going to have to be concerned about how long can they get away with this, this manipulating the ups and downs of the economy. And it looks like it's coming to an end, which means that in spite of my assumption that there's going to be a recession, it may be the introduction or a notice that the big one is coming, where all their tinkering is for naught, and then there will be an attack on the whole financial system, an especially strong attack against our dollar.
It almost sounds like the last days of a dope addict,
Yeah.
They keep trying to take that shot and it doesn't have the effect that it had before.
Right.
So, well, I'm looking at things, the first thing I was looking at is the media. And I should say, a little teaser, we're going to have our old friend Gerald Celente on next week. He's a pro. We're putting on our amateur clairvoyant hats, just with what we've seen. But we're gonna talk to him next week to see what he thinks about ours. But the first thing that I was thinking about for this year, predictions for this year, is the media. And I think we're starting to see some cracks in the mainstream media. And the first, and here's a stat that I know you used in your year-end letter for the Ron Paul Institute. There was a poll over the summer showing that 72% of Americans, 3 out of 4 Americans, believe that mainstream media reports news that it knows is wrong. And so talk about undermining the credibility. It's a crisis of credibility in the mainstream media. And I think that's why we see so much crackdown on alternative media or on independent media like the Ron Paul Institute and the Liberty Report, because their credibility is gone. But a couple of things make me believe, a couple of recent events make me believe that there are cracks in the edifice of the mainstream media. The first, and it wasn't much noticed, I noticed it on Drudge, but Jill Abramson, she was a former executive editor of the New York Times, and she's coming out with a book. She had a pretty scathing attack on her old employer. She said that the New York Times is really undermining its credibility because it's become unmistakably anti-Trump, and it's really just anti-Trump for the sake of being anti-Trump, and it's causing them to erode their credibility, to erode their reader base, and so that was a real hit from an insider. But the other one, and it's actually made some waves, is William Arkin, and he's been around for a long time. He's an award-winning national security journalist, defense journalist, and he's long been employed with NBC. A pretty objective guy. Well, he had a real high-profile resignation just yesterday, I think it was. He wrote a scathing email saying, I am resigning from NBC. It's just absolutely pro-war. and it's not taking anything into consideration. Here's a couple of quotes from what he said. He said, "I'm alarmed at how quick NBC is to mechanically argue in favor of policies that just spell more conflict and war. Why shouldn't we get out of Syria?" And here's another one. "In many ways, NBC just began emulating the national security state itself. Busy and profitable. No wars won, but the ball is kept in play." And he's no peacenik by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's a pretty objective, and in fact, we probably disagree with some of his stuff. He's a little more hawkish than we'd like. However, he looked at this and, talk about resigning a cushy job in the media that he's had for years, made the resignation. He says, "The mainstream media, my employer, they're just reflexively pro-war." This is something we've talked about for a long time. So I think 2019 is going to see increasing cracks in the edifice, the phony edifice of the mainstream media in ways that Russiagate or nothing else can match. And so I think it's a hopeful sign. And I hope more brave people like Arkin and others find their consciences again, remember what it means to actually be a journalist and not a propagandist, and start coming forth and blowing the whistle.
Yeah, and I might say, when people know the truth about things, they might change their attitude about the foreign policy. What I was thinking about when you were talking about the American people are starting to realize that they're not hearing the truth anyway, was what was going on in the Soviet system before it collapsed. Nobody believed anything the government printed and told them. They knew it was all propaganda, but that was a sign it was over, when they lost total confidence. So maybe this is good if they can turn that around and use it in a positive sense, that maybe it's the acknowledgement that we can't trust our government either, even in the socialistic sense, to take care of us, which some people want, or just to protect our liberty. So they've lost a lot of credibility. I wanted to follow up a little bit on the economics. I think that the foreign policy and the economic conditions of of the country has led to the concern about de-dollarization for the people who like the dollar. Mm-hmm. And there is a move on in that direction. The dollar is the reserve currency of the world. I think it's been a tremendous detriment to us because we had tremendous benefits from it. It was a free ride for us because we got to print the money and spend it overseas. And people took it, It caused these imbalances in trade, and we get into these trade squabbles and currency wars and things of that sort. So, but when you mix it in with foreign policy, we aggravate a lot of people because, not only do we throw our military weight around and tell people what to do, then we also get involved in the economic concerns of countries and interfering and use economic weapons. Like we deny some countries the ability to use the international financial system. We put on sanctions on countries and we penalize people, and that's getting old. So now, with some of the countries getting sick and tired of this, are talking about using alternative currencies and using something other than a dollar. And there has been this attempt made, but there's no smooth ride on this. It comes and goes, and one currency may be better than another, but there are countries like China and India and Russia and Iran. They're talking about it, and they've actually are using it. There is a point made the other day that Iran they're not as bad off, and they're getting more oil out than anybody dreamed. We thought we were going to close them down completely, but they must be selling oil in something other than dollars. So this is a big issue. And of course, in a free society, people should be able to use whatever currency they want. And it's also the reason why over the years, when you and I were in the congressional office, that we talked a lot about competing currencies. And competing currencies, to me, would be that if you don't like the dollar, go to another one. Or if you want to use what is still legal, and it's constitutional, is that it's gold and silver is legal tender, that the people should be allowed to use this as a currency and not be taxed on using gold and silver. Now, technology has led to the concept of cryptocurrency, which raises some interesting questions because it may turn out to be a substitute money. And my goal has always been to include that in as an alternative currency, but just as if you're going to promote a system of gold money, you better have the gold to back up, and you can't use fraud to promote something. So electronic activity and crypto technology should be in there, because I think it will be the direction. But the other thing, though, I think that because I've looked at monetary history over a long period of time, gold is still money, no matter what. Chairman Bernanke told me. He said, no way, it is not money. But I think it's money, and it's not because I like the idea of it being money. It's because there's a little bit of history on my side of the argument, and it's lasted all this time. And right now, as far as a prediction goes, gold, I think, did decently this year compared to the amount of money people lost in the stock market. But the price of gold didn't go anywhere. You know, it was sort of stable. But I have been working on the assumption that gold is actually in the early stages of a bull market, because after it got up to $1,800 in 2011, for 5 years it went down. It went down to $1,050, and that was really in the doldrums. So that was, that was 16. That's 3 years ago. But from 1,500, it's held pretty good. But I think it's going to go much higher, because I think these problems are going to get worse. The economies are going to get worse. The debt is going to get worse. The trade wars are going to get worse, and people are going to be looking for a safe haven. And if things fell apart, not only is it a safe haven in the immediate financial sense, it may become a practical haven too, which has happened many times. I keep telling myself, no, it can't get that bad. We're smarter than that to allow it to get that way. But I'm not so sure. Most of the people I ran into in Washington, even on the Federal Reserve Board, they have no concept of what sound money is all about. And they've been totally brainwashed by Keynesian economics that said deficits are fine, the Federal Reserve is necessary, they give us good times, and when the capitalists give us bad times, they bail us all out. So that's how they operate, and they truly believe it. But I think right now that if people are looking for a haven, and this is what I've have practiced myself over many, many years, because I got interested when gold was $35 an ounce. And the handwriting's on the wall, and that's when they got rid of the Bretton Woods, and they got licensed to print for anything and everything. And if you look at all the statistics, standard of living and real wages and debt burden that we've accumulated, it is just mountains high right now. And people say, well, gold is old-fashioned. Well, there are some things in life. Truth is old-fashioned too, but we don't give up on it. And I think truth and money is important. And I think it's important for people to at least look at it and see, I don't like to say I'm an investor in gold, because in investing in gold, it goes up, I'm going to sell. I never did that. But I thought of it as an insurance policy against the people who are running our government, the people who run our foreign policy. Yeah. How do we pay for this foreign policy and all these wars? But there's been a lot of talk about how are we going to afford these policies, and there's good articles sort of supporting Trump. They're quoting Trump now and said, I didn't want these wars. How can we afford it? Yeah. So he's really saying some great things there. But that might be the enlightenment that's coming, and then the recognition is on its way. And I think there's going to be some positive recognition this year in economics, in the sense that they're going to know the truth. The solutions will take a little while to work out, but at first you have to know what the problems is. The problems are diagnosis, and know what the proper answers are, and give up on the status quo of the central bank's going to solve all the problems. If they print the money and rig the interest rates, we'll all be okay. So this is the year we're going to change that attitude.
Yeah, that's upbeat. Well, I'll just do a quick second one, and it's going to start off pretty sad and pretty upsetting, but I think it'll end good. The neocons want to give Russia a black eye. They've been defeated in Syria. They wanted to overthrow the Syrian government. The Russians came in and destroyed their plans. They have not been successful in Ukraine. I predict that Ukraine is going to heat up in the short term. One of the things that caught my attention is on the 26th of December, the Times of London, UK Times, ran an article showing that Chechen radicals are leaving the battlefields in Syria They've trained with ISIS. They're leaving the battlefields in Syria. They're going to Ukraine because they love fighting Russians. They hate Russians. There's an election in March. Poroshenko is unpopular. We've already seen how unstable he is. This whole fiasco with the Kerch and this martial law that lasted a week or so, that everyone was excited thinking that something was going to happen. There's a lot of corruption in Ukraine. There's desperation. They want to hold on to power. The Chechens are coming. ISIS is coming into Ukraine. The U.S., of course, doesn't care. It's going to give Ukraine $250 million in military aid. So here you just have to do 2 and 2. You got a lot of terrorists, you got a lot of ISIS people coming in, and you got a lot more weapons floating around. It's just like Syria again. The neocons love this chaos they're creating. But I think the silver lining is, just as they failed in Syria, they will fail in Ukraine. They may actually create a self-fulfilling prophecy of the East breaking away for good if they continue to push this. So Ukraine is really, I think, in the target for 2019.
Well, very good. And maybe that'll turn into something positive. People recognize our foreign policy hasn't done well by intervention, and we'll do a little bit less. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. I hope you found this program somewhat different than our regular programs of interest to you. Please return to the Liberty Report soon.